The Battle of Britain is about to begin.
Detroit, we got tank truckers. Let's follow a range on Detroit. I do have that on the target right now. I've got a 17 right in front of me. I'm going after it.
Welcome back to the Lead Pursuit Podcast. As you know, we're always out there scouring the interwebs, trying to find the latest in wargaming for you. So I guess that was my task this week, because I stumbled across, in the middle of my doom scrolling through Facebook, a game called Aether Wings Discovery Flight. Now, not being very cybersecurity oriented, I immediately clicked on the link and immediately downloaded what was presented to me. But I found a cool new rule system, and it introduced me to an entire new game that I had no idea was even in the works. So tonight I've invited the game's designer on, Steve Mance, to talk about Aether Wings Discovery Flight. Steve, how you doing tonight?
Doing great, Doug. Thanks for reaching out. You shocked me when I got your email. But it was like 11:30 at night, woke up and, hey, want to talk about it? Yes, I do.
Yes, I do. Well, it's the best $3 you spent on Facebook. So yes, I never find anything useful on Facebook ads. It's so funny. It's either companies I know about, like Baron of Dice is every other ad in my Facebook feed. And I'm like, thank you. I already know there's really cool dice there. Or there will be a variety of Kickstarters that I'm like, oh, that's cool. It's not out yet. Oh, cool. Kickstarter hasn't started yet. Whatever. And then this one was like, download the rules. And I'm like, wait a minute. This has got to be a Chinese trick.
Yeah.
They're trying to track me down as a war gamer. But no. I picked up the rules and downloaded it. And so I said, we might as well get you on the podcast.
Well, I appreciate it. When I put Discovery Flight out, it was like putting a piece of my soul out there on the internet, and I put it out for free. I don't even have on itch.io. I don't even have tips enabled, and I did that intentionally. Because I want people to see just a little piece of what I'm building. Aether Wings Discovery Flight is actually the second chapter in the Aether Wings full rule book. And so what I did was I built a system. First and foremost, it's a system. And so when you master Discovery Flight, and then you go to Fighter Town, which is the next chapter,
next
the
one.
advanced rules, right? It's all stepping through the process, as we like to say in the military, right? But more importantly, once you sort of master Aether Wings, well, when you see Aether Steel on the interwebs and you click it, and you're going to get Armor Academy, and you're going to read through it, and hey, this is the same but totally different. And so that's why I built, I call it the Aether Drive system. So there'll be multiple games that you can pick any one of them, and they're not exactly the same. That I have to tweak things for different things. Tanks and aircraft are entirely different, but you know how to play Yahtzee, and it doesn't matter. I know there's a million versions of Yahtzee out there, but you know what you have to do, and it's changing the way you think about what you have to do for the different systems. So.
There was some interesting discussions I was watching from previous conventions this morning, where people were talking about the beauty of learning a basic rule system and then building on it, because then once you get someone in the door for that basic concept that's understandable, it's easier to then build them into either a different genre, a different time, a different vehicle. But this was obviously also couched in the world we all grew up in, wargaming, that was pre-YouTube, where if games didn't build on each other, if they didn't use very similar systems, you were learning an entirely new game when you went out and bought an expansion, and that wasn't the easiest way. So let's spin back a little bit to kind of pick apart your wargaming brain and things that have influenced you. How did you get started in wargaming? You know, what were those initial games you played? I know we talked a lot yesterday about role-playing games and that segueing into war games. Tell us how that really worked out for you.
So let's jump in that time machine then. Right?
Exactly. It's almost like we had this discussion yesterday.
Right. No, so I grew up in Hawaii, and in the late 70s, I was in I wasn't even in middle school yet. I think I was in 6th grade, 5th grade, something like that. On my way home, because remember back in the day when you would walk home from school?
It's weird. You'd walk home or you'd bike home. You didn't just magically get picked up by a car all the time. Yeah.
So as I was walking home from school, I would walk through the library. You walk in the front and out the back, and it was just sort of in my direction of travel. And I heard dice on the table. And my older aunties and uncles had talked about this magical game, and I heard it, and there were some cool kids, old kids, you know, they were probably 14 or 15, and they were playing, and the dungeon master guy named Max, and I'll always remember Max. He asked me, you know, hey, you want to try it out? And they were playing chainmail, and that started a journey that has lasted now 45 years. I've always been a nerd, if you will. Tried to be always the cool nerd, but that failed miserably many times. But in high school, I found my tribe, and we played D&D, and then I learned about BattleTech, and I love the guys at FOSSA. You know, this Catalyst, that's a whole different company, but the fact that I have an original copy of BattleTech, and that I can still play that game today with people who are playing the latest and greatest. And we'll circle back to that, but
that is still fascinating to me, because I'm looking at my old Aerotech, CityTech, BattleTech, Battle Force boxes over there, and people that have listened to the podcast hear me talk about this a lot. I put it away for years because I don't think I played it in college at all. I know I played a lot in high school, didn't play it at all in college. And then finally got drawn back in at a local convention because a buddy of mine's like, dude, you're an old BattleTech guy. Aren't you going to play? And it was like riding a bike. Right. Yeah, there's some new nuances to it, but it's basically the same game. And it was funny to just go back and have my arm blown off and beat another mech over the head with my arm that has been blown off. But yeah, all the things we loved about BattleTech.
The fact that I can take that white, maybe 30-page book to a convention and the rules still are germane. You know, it's not like, well, we're in season 54 and you're in season 1, so that book doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly.
So BattleTech was huge all through high school. Starfleet Battles.
Yes.
I actually didn't think about
that's the next shelf over on my gaming shelf over there.
We joked that was Starfleet Rules because, man, there's a lot of rules in that game. But I learned things from all of those games, and then when I left Hawaii, joined the Army National Guard. I was gone for a while. Come back, same group, and that was welcome. But then, marriage and babies and jobs and so that kind of
Well,
fell
life gets in
apart.
the way of gaming. That's no
Right?
fun.
That's crazy. And then fast forward some years, and I basically stopped gaming completely. But fast forward some years, I enlisted active duty in the Army. First duty station was Mannheim, Germany. And so I get there and I don't know anybody. There were a couple of guys that were, 3 or 4 classes ahead of me in AIT. But, they looked familiar, but we weren't friends kind of thing.
Yep.
So the first Friday night I was there, go over to the bowling alley, grab a beer, and I bowl, but no, but it was the one place that I knew because it was
Yeah.
part of in processing. Hey, that's the
Yep.
bowling alley over there. And so I go in the bar and order a beer, and the bartender, we chat for a second, and I look right behind him, and there was Dungeon and Dragons 2.5 edition, I think, player handbook, or I don't remember exactly what the book was. And I was like, whoa, I was like, hey, where do people play around here? And he said, the USO every Friday night. And so the 3 years I was stationed in Germany, I played D&D almost every Friday night, much to my wife's chagrin. That's when I learned about Magic the Gathering. I had seen Magic when I was in college, but a card game? Really? That's not
Exactly.
gaming. I wish I had bought that alpha box and
Yeah,
stored
exactly.
it away,
Things knowing now. Yeah.
right? And then from there, I PCS to Virginia, and the first place that I found was World's Best Comics. As far as I know, I actually saw a video. They're still open.
Yeah.
And that, I tried to join a D&D group there. Didn't work out well. I wasn't a good fit because they were all old friends and I was the new guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also found Warhammer Fantasy Battles. 6th edition had just launched, and I was like, that's cool. And then a couple of weeks later, and I didn't tell you this part, a couple of weeks later, I was on CQ, and the guy that was with me, he was like, hey, have you ever heard of this game Warhammer? And I was like, I just saw that. And I've been aware of Games Workshop for a long time. We played Blood Bowl when I was in high school, when it was still cardboard standees and
Yep.
stuff. But so I had been aware, and I had just recently been in that shop and saw it, and then I was like, this is cool. He's like, hey, they just launched a new starter box. I want the orcs. Do you want to play Empire? And I was like, well, why don't you buy a box and I buy a box? And then we just swap the armies. That was, I want to say, in 2000. And 26 years later, my house has all kinds of Warhammer stuff. Fantasy Battles died. The old world, nobody plays it. So 40K is king, especially here in Japan. But something that I've always known. I've known it for probably since I was 20. That there's 3 types of gamers. There's the gamer. There's the I'm going to have the comic book store and I'm going to read comics and play games and make millions of dollars. And then there's the game designer. And when we were in high school, a friend of mine, Richard, he made the wrestling game. I don't think it ever had a name, but we were all into WWF at the time.
Yeah.
And so we, he came up with the idea, and together we built this wrestling game, and we played it constantly. I wish I still had the rules to that game, because looking back now, that's a very viable game that people would like. That third group of gamers are the designers, and I've been a gamer for 45 years. I had the opportunity to buy a comic book store, and I'm glad I didn't.
Thankfully, you walked away.
I walked away. Deployment came up, and so the deal fell through, and I'm glad it did. But designing where Aether Wings started had nothing to do with aviation. It was actually based on the game that I started designing in this era, if you will. It was a play off of what I could remember from the wrestling game, and some things I had written over time. And I was like, well, sci-fi, wrestling, blah, blah, blah. And I was mashing those things together, and I was like, this is hard. And then the DoD said you can use Gen AI. And so, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, the use of AI in the game sphere. So I was very skeptical at first. And then my boss was like, hey, we need to at least try to use this at work. And I was like, this is garbage and it doesn't work. Well, because I'm still very much military adjacent, we make funny pictures of each other.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I was like,
something good from AI.
Right? And so I was like, hey, Chat GPT, make this guy in a dress, and then I was like, wow, this might actually be a useful tool. And then the Aetherborn cycle, which is the entire world that I'm building, because I can talk to chat, and I'm dictating to it, and it cleans up my thoughts a little bit. It made it so that because I natively type 30 words a minute, but I think 1,000 words a minute, I can type
Right.
as fast as I think. And so what I didn't want to see, or what I didn't want to do was, and actually I tried it. I tried to develop like 16 game systems at the same time. And I was like, this is not working, because, I'm over here working on this, and then I'm working on that, and and they don't marry. And I didn't like that. And then I was going through some stuff, and I ran across my old BattleTech stuff. And I looked at it, and I was like, hey, I can play BattleTech. I could play BattleTech right now. And my youngest son, the one of the few games that my kids were ever interested in was BattleTech. My youngest son, he lives in Utah. He's a member of the BattleTech player group in his area and stuff. And so I was looking at that, and I was like, these are simple. The rules are simple. They're very nuanced, but this is kind of the road that I need to go down. Yeah. And so from there, I started working on a different era, which was the Wild Wild West era. And then a YouTuber who I love launched a Kickstarter. And so I was talking to a bunch of my friends about this great, wonderful new game that I'm developing. And they're like, have you heard of this guy? And if it was one guy, cool, I get it. If it was two guys, but it was like 10 guys were like, yeah, you might want to look at something else,
Yeah.
And so because I had developed this whole arc, I was like, okay, well, let's move forward to the next era. Next era being the World War II inspired. And so, and what I originally was developing was role-playing games. Role-playing games are hard to develop. And like they're really hard. And so trying to get systems to mesh and get all my ideas on paper. And then a friend of mine was like, hey, what if you have, or he wanted to play a pilot in the role-playing game. And I was like, yeah, cool. But now I have to come up with systems for flying.
Yeah.
And I'm not an aviator. I love aviation. I'm not an aviator. And so, again, I kind of went back to that whole Battletech FASA idea of how do I make this simple? And that is how Aether Wings was born. And then I was like, well, I backed a whole bunch of stuff on Kickstarter, and I'm like, hey, yeah, I could put this on Kickstarter and make $1 billion. And then I actually read about it and
how it all works.
Yeah. So I decided that I'm going to build a game. I'm going to build a system and then build things that just are progressively larger. And we talked about, you go to cons or whatever and you see a game and it's cool. And then, so you pick up the quick start rules or the free rules and it's cool and you get it. And then you buy the whole game and you no longer get it.
Yeah.
And, it's like when you video games, you play the demo and it's awesome. And then you play the game and it's stupid because you don't get it. Well, So I decided, you know what, I'm going to do this in stages. And so I put out Discovery Flight. And Discovery Flight it's a standalone game. You've gone through it. Thanks for the proofreading, by the way. I ran into another problem last night, but I'll fix it.
Oh, I'm sure there's a few. That's you will never hammer them all out. There's
right.
It's like playing whack-a-mole. There's always one more.
But people are very much welcome to download Discovery Flight for free and never look at another one of my products. I hope that they do. But when I formed Gunslinger Studios LLC, I wrote myself an ethos. And one of the ethos key points was quick starts will always be free. They'll always be live. And when I update other rules, if it affects the quick start, I'll go and update the quick start, and I'll put it out on my website. I'll put it out on Itch.io. I need to look at Board Game Geek. But
that's a good resource. It takes a while to learn how to do all this stuff. Some of it's a little obtuse,
and I was like, "Wow!"
Yeah, I was fortunate that I had guys on the Fulcrum Leader team like Ben Chi who are quite familiar with Board Game Geek, and I'd be like, "Hey, man, make sure we get stuff posted."
And that's the other thing, right? Gunslinger Studios is me. I'm
one-man operation.
I'm the CEO. I'm the lead designer. I'm the head bottle washer.
And you're the janitor, and you're the logistics guy ordering more paper.
So that's kind of my story arc. I'm sorry, I kind of rambled for a bit.
No, that's good.
From 9-year-old guy to 9-year-old boy to 56-year-old. Game designer that started a real company. So
no,
I have a business license at least.
If you feel all important, you frame that. You're like, I got my business license.
Actually, I did.
Well, so let's talk a little bit of inspiration here. we were talking yesterday and kind of laughing that you've never played Blood Red Skies, which is fine because a lot of people haven't. You know, it's the game that probably our group has played the most amongst aerial war games, but we've also played, Aeronautica Imperialis, things like that. But were there any rule systems that really inspired anything you did, either in Aether Wings or in the whole Aether cycle, your concept of that? Was there a game that you had run across other than BattleTech that you said, hey, that really did it right? Was there a more modern system? Because I think what a lot of us recognize, at least what I see when I open up rules written by us older guys, is I see some of the gems from the past that people don't know why they worked. Right. And it's so funny to me because I'm like, oh, he's a 2D6 guy. All right. So he understands a little bit about dice odds here, So it's funny to see that, whereas so many people who are from the 40K, 6th edition plus era, it's dice pools. I'm rolling 14 D6, 15 D6, and it's a stacking odds thing, rather than when I looked at the rules, I was like, oh, wait a minute, here we go. Here's a elegant odds designing, not just massing more and more dice, which has its utility. There's times to do dice pools. But yeah, what were some of the games that you at least felt like you were willfully stealing from as you started designing?
There's no original product in today's world.
No, there's not, and especially not in gaming. That was the other comment I was hearing people say this morning so much is they're like, there's nothing original in gaming. Everything's borrowed from somebody else.
Music and movies and gaming. So I know, and we've never discussed this. This is only our second conversation, but I know from talking that you are at least aware of, I think it was GDW, Game Designers Workshop, or it may have been Avalon Hill, Blue Max.
Yep. I do not have a copy. Surprisingly,
I have just about
every other one. I
love that game. I found an online version of it years ago that I could play on my government computer at the time.
Exactly.
But Blue Max had a lot of there's a lot of design cues are taken out of that. The pre-plotted movement. In that game, you had this card and it had all these different moves on it, and you had to write them down on your turn thing, and then everybody revealed and did your movement, and if you were out of phase, you were out of phase, and oh well. So that was a big one. BattleTech, of course, I've talked about. 2D6, I have I don't know, thousands of D6, and then polyhedral dice, another 1,000 of those. But I wanted simple, I wanted elegant, and I kind of borrowed the 2D6 system from BattleTech, and and the odds are easy. You're gonna roll a 7, So and I actually designed everything around 7. Because I know how that's going to work. And so, you have a target number of 8. Well, I set that target number of 8 because it's a little harder than 7. Some target numbers in a couple of the other systems are like a 4 because it's a very simple task. All my games.
We were laughing. For 2d6, because Void Fighter, its damage table is always a 2d6 damage table, and 7, the most standard result is fighter destroyed. And so I laughed at the designer. I'm like, well, this is a very easy way to make it a very brutal game. Is all the other in the opposite directions, it stacks away into more esoteric kind of hits, but 7. Fighter destroyed. I'm like, you just made a very fast game there, and that's why he did it. For that same reason. I know my odds and how my odds table works, so that's going to kill people and take their fighters off the board quickly. But
so I also looked at Dungeons and Dragons, of course. Gary Gygax, the man, right?
He put the bell curve in the Dungeon Master's Guide. That's where I first was introduced to dice odds. Was as God, I don't even know how old I was. Not very old. Reading through the DM's guide and this whole discussion about
Right.
2d6.
So I looked at stats, and you know aircraft better than I do. I know mechanical systems, and if you were to stat out everything in an aircraft or on a vessel, you have pages of just stats, and I was like, I need like 6, and so hull is hit points. The other mechanic, and a lot of things when I design stuff is I'll go out and I'll look what other games have a similar mechanic, because
Right.
I don't want people to say, oh, you just copied Blood Red Skies. Well,
Exactly.
I may have. I don't know. I've never played it. I've never read it. I watched a couple of videos on YouTube about it. It looks cool and I want to play. And next time I'm in your area, we'll play.
Come on, let's play. Yeah.
So then I was looking at like the game you were describing, 7, you're dead. Well, generally in games, you take hull damage, or you take hit point damage, or you bleed, or whatever it may be. And I was like, that's exciting, but that's boring because everybody does that. So here's a second kill mechanic. And I threw in strain as a second mechanic. So you actually have 2. They're not hit point tracks, and they kind of bounce off of each other. And with hull damage, you can't get out and patch your plane midair. But strain, you can recover strain, because it's not only strain on the aircraft, it's strain on the pilot as well. So slow down, take a breath, take a sip of coffee if that's what you do in the cockpit, whatever it may be. But yeah, and you recover kind of strain. In our play testing, in the first probably 3 or 4 games, strain killed more aircraft than bullets did. So I dialed some stuff in a little bit. And because of the way I structured the turn, all damage and all strain gets allocated at the end of the turn. And I did that intentionally as well, because I want everybody to at least get to play one round. Fly at each other at a high rate of speed, and player A shoots down player B, and that's the end of the game. That's boring, right?
Yep.
But the way I structured it, everything's at the end of the round, and that allows for at least one good turn of
Gaming.
combat. And the very first game that my playtesters ran, guy flies in. It was a few rounds, but a guy flies in, shoots this plane, but he did a hyper maneuver to get there, and end of the turn, failed his strain roll. He falls out of the sky. The other guy, hull blows up.
Yeah.
Both guys died, and that was glorious. It was a cinematic moment, and win conditions being win conditions, it's a game and you want to win. But in my mind, those cinematic moments are really what make a game into an experience. And I didn't plan it that way. It just happened, and everybody was like, that is so cool. So...
Yeah, we were talking yesterday. I had flipped through the rules and kind of math hammered some things, and I looked at them like, wait a minute, it might take me a while to actually shoot somebody down. Mm-hmm. It is more likely one of us is going to put too much strain in our aircraft, fail our strain check, and rip the wings off or pass out or whatever mm-hmm. we're simulating there at that point, aircraft or pilot based. But yeah, I enjoyed reading through the mechanics. I think the funny thing for me was we talk about things that are going in assumptions about aviation games. And like you said, in Blue Max, pre-plotted movement was the first thing that I picked out there. And you haven't listened to our podcast. Hopefully, I hope you haven't wasted too much of your time listening to our podcast. I did my
due diligence.
But pre-plotted movement, I either love it or hate it, depending on how it's employed in there. Because a lot of games are very restrictive in their pre-plotted movement. I mean, you must do this, and you're picking move Romeo 1-5, and that means you're going to exactly do this. And so, anytime I come up to a pre-plotted movement system, like, okay, so where's my decision? And it was cool to see that the wording of yours changed. There were some pre-plotted moves that were very specific, and there are others that were move up to. So, it was a chance that you're like, okay, if I really screw it away, I have to take this level of strain, but I can turn up to 90 degrees. So I can decide to not make this hard break left and go, okay, I'm only going to go 45 so I can reverse back the other way because I chose the wrong direction.
Right.
Things like that I think are interesting. And obviously, as you're building this game system, there are certain things that'll become kind of your core mechanics or your core mantras. And it'll be interesting for me to see it as it evolves, how pre-planned movement fits into that. Because that's always something that either people write it in the movement phase and forget about it, and it never really interacts with the rest of the game, or it becomes a logical part of that decision-making that you're committing to something, but you can always change if you give something up. Like I said, in this case, you're going to take the strain either way, but you don't have to eat the whole maneuver, things like that.
And so that, and you hit it on the head. You got me, right? Because of games like Blue Max, where now I'm 18 hexes in the wrong direction because I can't tell right from left, or, you figured out what I was going to do. So that's why, rules are important, obviously, but player agency is important as well.
Yes.
And so talking to my guys, because I had it in my head, but talking to my guys, I was like, well, so I'm going to make you pre-plot your movement, but, you can make that 45-degree turn at the beginning of your movement, halfway through your movement, at the end of your movement. And so they're like, that gives me the agency. I chose to do this, but I'm not locked into now I'm in hex A6034. And the other thing that I did, and I went back and forth, was how initiative worked. And I think when I get back into naming convention, it's not going to be called initiative. It's going to be called tactical advantage, because, every game you play, you win initiative, you go first. And I don't like that. I want to be able to pick who goes first. Well, now that gives me a whole nother set of problems. And I was like, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to pre-plot the movement with player agency involved. And because it's all card-based, you put it down on your command board, and then you roll initiative. And then the person who wins initiative decides who has the first activation. And then you flip over the cards and see if you guessed right. So I kind of turned it around like that. And that comes from a whole lot of, games that I've played over the years where he who wins initiative wins the round. And if it was roll for initiative and then pick your cards, now that took away.
It changes your math. It changes your whole math. Way.
It changes your tactical advantage. And so did I take away some of that tactical advantage? Maybe a little bit, but it also forces you to pre-plan a little bit. And I thought it was a cool mechanic, to be honest with you.
Well, there's games that do that I like. Aeronautica Imperialis. If you win initiative, you decide, do I go first or do I go second? But what the advantage, it's an interesting balance, because you're like, sure, I can move last, but it means that guy gets to shoot first if I give up moving first. And so there's and in that game, unlike Aether Wings, in that game, damage takes effect as you're shot. So
Right.
if there's times you don't shoot first, you just get tabled and it gets painful.
Mm-hmm.
But there's, I always go back to the discussion I've had so many times with these are games. They're going to be, they're a dark representation of the real world. We can't make them, they're not simulations. It's not us hopping into networked computers, putting on the goggles and running a simulation of this. This is modeling it. So we've got to accept some things between initiative or how damage tiers work, and that there's, how things are done. But I actually want to get around to playing it. We'll see. I don't think I'll play it on Monday. I think I still have to play my Aeronautica crowd. They're kind of impatient. We just got them into playing Void Fighter, and a couple of them play Void Fighter on opposite weeks. But everyone's like, we need to play Aeronautica again. So I'm going to be drugged back into that one, I think.
Well, I looked at Aeronautica, and I think I know one guy who plays. I love the idea, but. Yeah. And that's something else that we talked about is you see all these cool games, Blood Red Skies being one of them, Wings of War and Wings of Glory, I think.
Yep.
The models look great. Game looks great.
Like there's no one to play with. Yeah. Well, and nobody plays Wings of Glory or either the World War I or the World War II one here. And Wings of Glory is the only World War I game I enjoy playing. I hate World War I aviation games, and I normally hate pre-plotted games, but there's just something about those miniatures and how that all works out that makes it super enjoyable for me to fly a World War I airplane that normally I absolutely hate.
Well, and the fact that you don't have to build and paint the model, that helps.
Exactly. Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So that's actually something else I would like to touch on. I don't know if it's in your list.
Well, I was about to ask about models and miniature agnostic. Yep, exactly, and all of that. So give us the pitch on that.
I've talked a lot about 40K.
As a frustrated 40K player. 40K. Yeah, right? Exactly.
And your listeners won't be able to see this, but when you download and you go to, I think it's page 14 in version 1.1, there's templates. So it's a 60 mil base. I glued the compass onto it, got a little split pin and put a outline of an airplane on it. That's a very viable way to play the game. That's the marketed way to play the game. I'm not an STL designer. I'm not a model designer. I don't do any of that. I don't want Gunslinger Studios to be a miniatures company that happens to put out game rules to support the crack dealers, the plastic crack dealers around the world. So model agnostics is something that it's important to me because, I wasn't always the fine, upstanding citizen that I am today with retirement and disability and a real salary. I couldn't afford that stuff when I was in E3 with two kids, know. But I can always go to Kinko's and print out a little template and throw it on the board. And,
you grew up in the era I did where BattleTech was cardboard standees.
Standees.
And I have a handful of BattleTech miniatures from the late 80s, early 90s, but I have tons. I mean, literally, I'm looking at 2 tackle boxes full of cardboard standees because I had the reinforcement pack. I had all the other different 2 different versions of the rules. And that was good enough. That was how we played in high school. I played one game with miniatures my entire BattleTech career in high school. One game with miniatures. All the rest were with the cardboard ones. And in a sense, while I love miniature wargaming, there's a lot to be said for how we used to play with imagination. And it wasn't, you didn't need everything to be there. And whether it's cardboard standees for BattleTech, we had them for D&D. Played with cardboard heroes all the time because I had a number of metal miniatures, but my parents couldn't afford to buy me every single miniature I wanted, but you could go out and buy cardboard heroes.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot to be said for making the game not require you to go down the plastic crack,
Yeah.
intervention.
I've been in contact with a couple of SCL designers. Ask your buddy to call or to email.
Exactly. Steve, when you're listening to this episode, you better call the other Steve.
But I am not adverse to partnering with a designer, and we can do official licensing or whatever. But it's written in the front of every single one of my rules. It's written in my studio ethos is I'm not a miniatures company, and I'm not going to be a miniatures company. And I have this grand vision of going to Adepticon and seeing 1,000 people playing my game, because of course I do.
Yes, of course you wouldn't want that. Yeah.
Right. But if one guy wants to use a 60 mil base with a plain silhouette on it, and another guy has a kit bashed plane, and cool, welcome to my world. In Hawaii we say "E komo mai." It's welcome to my world, and I build the world and you play in it.
Yep. And
how you want to play in it, hey, send me some pictures, because I want to see that. And I'm
well, it was funny. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I have a Games Workshop here near me, and it's one of the few in Japan that the manager is an English speaker, and so I go in there all the time. I own a 3D printer, of course, because but I can't print out my army and take it to play there.
Right.
But there's another game shop not that far from me, and I've talked to him, and he said, if you ever go to market, I'll carry your product. And I'm like, cool. And he asked me, what about miniatures? And I said, well, I know you have a bunch of guys that play a bunch of different games. I don't care. Yeah. And it's right there in the rules. I don't care. I do care, but I don't care. So.
Well, but I was, we talked about it a little bit yesterday. I was laughing. I'm like, why 1/44th scale? But then in my mind, as we're talking about it, I'm like, that's an easy scratch build scale, because it's not as big as a 1/72nd scale model that you're going to now have big things you have to carry around, but it's big enough that you can get detail. And if you go out and buy a series of these models, you can scratch build things that fit whatever part of the lore you're really trying to hammer down on, whether it's something that looks, smells, and feels like a World War II airplane, or if it's super dieselpunk and, Art Deco look. You can do that in a scale like 1/44th. 1/144th. You really can't do that in a scale like, 1/300th, 1/600th. So you've got your little arrow-shaped airplane,
right? So we play tested at 1/72nd scale, and the game works. The game works really well at 1/72nd scale. It becomes a knife fight on a 30x30 board. We chose 30x30 because the guy that we play his house, his dining room table is 32 inches wide. Yeah. And I was like, well, I can't put a 36-inch board on a 32-inch table. I can't put a 46-inch board, so I designed around his table. And 1 to 72nd works. I'm sure that 1 to 200, which isn't much different than 1 to 1/44th. I've seen these crazy 1 to 700 scale.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's not even a model. That's just a bit of plastic.
I know. I laugh. I see how some people have painted them. I'm like, wow, you are literally painting on a grain of rice. Yeah.
Right. That is not this guy. So
not me. Not me.
Yeah. So I dialed in. I didn't choose the scale first. I chose the base size first, because measuring is done base to base, not actually aircraft to aircraft or tank to tank or person to person. It's base to base. And I happen to have like 50, 60 mil round bases. And I ordered them for a project some time ago. And I was like, yeah, I'm never going to get that project done. So I grabbed them up and I was looking at different scales. I found some pre-painted, but you still have to buy models put out here in Japan some years ago. I found some in a secondhand shop, and I was like, oh, yep, okay, so I don't have to paint, bet. And so I brought them home, I built them, and I put them on the 60 mil base, and they looked awesome. So 60 mil round base.
Better to be lucky than good.
Standard. Yeah, and it kind of, that's how the scale was decided. If I had run into 1 to 200 scale, Blood Red Skies plans, I would probably be 1 to 200 scale. But accessibility is a big one. I went on Amazon, and I was like 1 to 144 scale World War II Type aircraft, and the list is long and distinguished.
Oh yeah.
So and I was like, that was cool. You touched on kit bashing. Yep. So the one thing about Aether Wings as a whole is that it's World War II inspired. So the models that I'm using are World War II models because, again, I'm not an STL designer. But, the visual, it goes back to that player agency. When I get the artwork done, people will be able to see that, yeah, that looks like a P-51 Mustang. But... so
there's recognizable design elements, but that's not a P-51D,
So and FOSSA did another game called Crimson Skies.
Oh yeah, I've got my copy over there.
Yeah, and of course they ruined it and did the clicky thing, and I don't play clicky based games because so. I guess, I forgot to mention that as one of the inspirations, but one thing that people will be able to see not in step 1, which is Discovery Flight, and not in step 2, which is Aether Wings, but in step 3 is plane design. You'll be able to design your own. Pilots are coming online. Pilot as sort of characters, but also pilot abilities will affect things. I've done probably about 80% of the design for the extended rules. Pilots was big for me. Getting the build your own aircraft rule set together, man, that's why that's in the later stages.
That always hurts. I helped Pat Doyle when we did the original space fighter build rules in Squadron Commander 3600, and that was painful because it became a very much min-max kind of thing. Then as he was building the rules for Star Force Commander for ships and being able to build that there, he wanted it to be intuitive but not be a min-max kind of thing. And so thankfully I didn't delve too much into the weeds with him, but I watched as he was building the starship construction set on the back end of everything and saying, okay, let's make it so these things are plausible, so there's a reason why there's a cost balance to it. But yeah, that is a very tough part of a game to get balanced well,
I've because I already put that build your own plane system. I've stress tested it, and it stresses me out, and that's why I had to. Because originally it was going to be part of step 2 or Aether Wings, but that's something I'm going to have to mess with and prototype and play test, and FOSSA guys did it best. As far as a mechanic out there, and I have leaned very heavily into their design cues for that system.
Right.
Um, that was the best part about BattleTech when
Oh yeah.
I was 15 years old. You know?
Yeah.
So,
I laugh because in BattleTech, the battle mech design system, and it was one of the funniest parts about Traveler and that branch of games, different than Dungeons and Dragons. In D&D, you just acquired gold and weapons and magic items. But in Traveler, there became this point where you're like, I'm tired of owning this piece of crap starship that somebody is making me pay a mortgage on. I want to build a starship. And so you draw up these plans and go through all the stats and stuff. And it was always fun to balance that out and figure out, you're like, oh, that's a really cool starship. And there's no way my character is ever going to make that much money to buy this thing, you know? So then you'd go back into the design process and trim things out and try to get something that was
almost
playable.
A game in and of itself, right?
Exactly. And that's that role-playing element in a war game that is so much fun because it's customizing something, whether it's an airplane or a character or a tank. It's the ability to create your own story. I mean, for those of us old 40K guys, Rogue Trader, it was the reason you made your own chapter or you made your own Imperial Guard regiment was because you wanted your own story. I didn't want to tell the same story as everyone else.
Right, because everybody can play Ultramarines.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to play the Smurfs, you play the Smurfs. I hate the Smurfs.
Hey, good on you. You know, they have the best rules of
they do. I was so mad in I want to say I think it was 7th edition when the chapter specific rules came back and I had picked my chapter to be an Imperial Fist successor. And I looked at the Ultramarines and I'm like, son of a, they've got all the good rules. You know?
Yeah, they do. I love the Salamanders.
Yeah.
Because they're the good guys. They're the only good guys.
The only good guys, yeah.
But I love the Salamanders. Flamers are great against Imperial Guard. You know,
everything else not so much.
Against Tyranids, they're wonderful, but you know, against another Space Marine, they're garbage. But so being able to do that self-design and again, one of my taglines is I build worlds, you play in them. That's almost permission, right? That's a permission that a lot of these mega companies worth $8.5 billion, they don't give you a lot of permission. That was an interesting thing in 40K 10th edition when they said that your Salamanders can be blue and your Ultramarines can be purple. And, you know, they took that exact paint scheme requirement away. And for some of the grognards and from some of the actually guys, you know, you're using the wrong shade of ultramarine blue. No.
40K neckbeards and Napoleonic grognards are genetically about a third of a chromosome different. They're so close.
That's a father-son relationship.
Yeah, exactly. It is, because the same people that bitched about that's not Prussian blue. Prussian jackets had silver buttons, not gold buttons. You know, those are the same people that are like, I'm sorry, the Ultramarines, you've got to use McCragg blue, and there's got to be a dry brush of whatever. I remember, because we keep coming back to Rogue Trader. I took my Rogue Trader force and years later was playing it against a guy who I was fond of reminding him I had stopped playing Warhammer longer than he had been playing Warhammer, almost longer than he'd been alive. And he sees my green Space Marines. He's like, oh, are those Salamanders? And I looked at him, I said, when I painted these guys, the Salamanders weren't even listed as a chapter in Rogue Trader.
Right. I saw something out of Rogue Trader, and it was like an individual Space Marine, Sergeant Jones or whatever, and his mother was an Eldar, and his father was.
Rogue Trader was a role playing game. It was a skirmish miniatures role playing game. You could arm your people with whatever you wanted. You know, Space Marines didn't just have bolters; they had shuriken cannons. They had all the different stuff. You know, so it was it was a choose your own adventure. You built your list with whatever weapon you wanted, whatever stats you wanted. And that's why I liked it, because I had just come out of Dungeons and Dragons and Robotech RPG and those games. And this was it was what we think of now as grimdark light. It wasn't as grimdark as 40K is now, but it was something that was just different. It was dingy. It was, it wasn't the pristine Star Trek world that so much sci-fi was at that point.
Blade Runner, it was closer to the cyberpunk grime and dirtiness. Yeah.
I felt like it was a cross between Star Wars and all the cyberpunk genre of stuff, because it was things were always pitched as being on the frontier or out and away, and it was never it wasn't like Star Trek where you're like, okay, we're going to go from Earth and we're going to go out to the Romulan frontier, and it was very vast. So but now we've totally gotten away from talking about your game again.
Well, I'm just enjoying the conversation at this point, but okay, so we'll circle back a little bit. This conversation we just had about factions, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So there are factions in my world, but they're the lore. They're not the game. When Aether Wings full release it comes out, because you see in Discovery Rings, there's fighter.
Yeah,
that's it. Right?
One fighter.
One fighter. Well,
you're just being stingy. That's all right. You just don't want to give us anything else to play with.
Hey, it's free. Come on now. No,
exactly. Here's your one free airplane.
Right. Miniature of the month. Here you go. Free.
Yeah, exactly.
No, so there's common aircraft to both factions, the East and West. The Second Aether War happened in North America, not in Europe. So, but there's common aircraft, and I figure in my head there are McDonnell Douglas built enough DC-9s that everybody has them, kind of thing. But then there are faction specific aircraft, but there's not a requirement unless you're playing very certain scenarios. That if you want to, so the two major factions are I always get this wrong, and I wrote it, so I shouldn't get it wrong. But the Greater Pacifica Continuum is the West Coast faction, and then the Atlantic Mutual Defense Force is the East Coast function, and the war happens right around the Rocky Mountains. But unless you're playing very specific scenario play, each of them have their own flavor of aircraft. Again, going back to BattleTech, I love FASA. The TROs, the technical readouts, right? You flip through them, and one thing I realized was, and I was like today years old when I realized it, in BattleTech there's like 6 different mechs, right? But you look at that picture, and I remember the first time I cracked that book open, right? And I saw the picture of the Banshee, and I was like, that's my mech, but if you look at weapons loadouts and speeds and all these different things, there's really only about 6 different designs. So
I always laugh because there's that optimization point that you're at a certain point, you are building a proxy of another design, and you're either shoving it into a lighter hull or a heavier hull. And that's at least how it was before the number of weapons and different kinds of heat sinks and all those other things that were later on added into the rules. But when you're playing basic either battle droids, if you're a really old guy, or BattleTech, I don't have a first edition. I've got regular BattleTech. I don't have a battle droids.
I don't know if you can still find that.
Yeah. I think they all got buried in a landfill somewhere. Plausible deniability.
Right.
But there was a point where there wasn't. You could only have so much variance, because otherwise you really were copying something else with a compromise because you were lighter. So that meant you either were slow or you had less armor or, something like that to carry that same weapons load around the battlefield.
Well, ultimately, in Aether Wings, you have interceptors, fighters, and heavy fighters, and then heavy gunships, which I envision as like the DC-9, or even better would be the what do they call it? Puff the Magic Dragon.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, the 141 with the
AC-47. Yeah, exactly.
That always tickles me anytime I see that thing putting lead down range. But
yep.
So for basic hull types, and then in Discovery Flight you have guns and rockets. And the only reason I put rockets in Discovery Flight was because I needed a vehicle to introduce keywords so to get people used to keywords, right. Ammo being a keyword. Okay, here you go, rockets. But there'll be a bunch of different weapons types, both conventional and Aether powered weapons types. And so the differentiators are going to be, like you said, in speed, amount of armor, weapon, number of hard points, like this. The super heavies have the same base rule set, because I'm not changing the rules for every little thing. Same rule set. They just have more hard points and they have bigger crew sizes. And then once we get to joint ops, then bombers come online, infantry comes online, armor comes online, field artillery comes online. But to circle back to the very beginning, it's all built on the same system. And that was important to me as a designer. They're not copy paste, but it's the same bones, really, with a different skin and maybe an extra arm. So.
Well, but that's a lot of what makes game designs successful, that you don't go from, we're playing with airplanes, it's a roll above, but for tanks it's a roll under, and you're not just changing how people's systems work. You go, the system's going to work the same way, the modifiers may be different, the terms may even be different, but offense defense works this way. We were talking about Blood Red Skies with a couple people the other day, and I said, even if you don't like the way the odds work out, don't change the action reaction part of the rules. You still need, somebody shoots at you, I make a defense roll. Then that determines what happens to my aircraft's advantage, et cetera, but I've automatically taken my boom chit. So now there's a morale influence because I've been shot at. And people are like, shouldn't I change that? I'm like, no, not in a home game. If you want to write your own rules, knock yourself out. But if you're just, creating a rule for a home scenario you've done, don't fool with the core way, because people aren't going to know how to play your scenario. They'll be like, no, when I get shot at, I roll a defense. And you're like, no. This is different in my home game. They won't. They're not going to want to do that.
And the other thing that, a shameless plug, if you will, is I don't want people to say, hey, that's Steve, the Aether Wings guy. I want people to say, hey, that's Gunslinger Studios, and they may only have one thing out, but after this conversation, you already know that everything is already planned and 90% of it is working. It's not, this isn't a pipe dream. I did that for 56 years. This is an actual thing, and there's some sustainability. And when I was designing the design, it was sustainability. How can I prove that this is not a one-off? And we see all the Kickstarters, and dude makes, 10,000 cash after everything, and then you never hear from him again. I don't want to be that guy. The last tenet, the last ethos. I have 4 kids. I have 3 girls and a boy, or I'm sorry, 3 boys and a girl. Hopefully, my kids don't hear that.
Exactly.
My older 2 sons, they're off doing their thing. Not interested. My middle son's a video gamer. My oldest son, not a gamer at all. My youngest son, he's the BattleTech player. My 3 sons are adults, and they're living their life, and good on them, and I love them, and I'm there for them. My daughter is 11. So when I was looking at the studio and writing these things that actually are part of the business plan, I was like, I'm not going to be here forever. And this is something that, if I can make it successful, is this something that my children will be able to take over? And, and so talking to my youngest son and talking to my daughter, my mom says that I'm raising a little psychopath because she's helping me design some other games. But we actually have 3 different bookshelves in the studio, and we have the Aetherborn cycle, and that's the games that I'm specifically writing in this lore set. And then we have Gunslinger games. We developed a game called Captain Poopy Pants. It's college humor all day, every day.
Yeah, exactly. That's perfect.
if you'd like, I'll shoot you a copy of the rules.
Absolutely.
It's a hilarious, stupid game. It doesn't fit in this bookshelf.
Yes.
And then I was thinking of some things that I can get my daughter involved in, and she's 11, so she's in sort of that mid stage, right? She's still a kid. She's not quite a teenager yet. So I started looking at Cookie and Me games, and Cookie and Me games is family fun. It's not college humor. It's not deep lore cycle. It's a little bit deeper than Candyland. But there's some messaging involved in there. Commerce games have always been my gig too, right? Yeah. So stock market games and stuff like that. I love them. And I don't know why. Maybe because I grew up poor. So
but you're the guy that's out there on Consim World trying to find a copy of Acquire. You're like, I'm the only guy that wants to buy Avalon Hill Acquire.
You know this game.
I do. I see it come up every once in a while. I'm like, nope, not going to buy that one. There's a lot of Avalon Hill titles I look for, and not that one.
Noble House, the James Clavell game or novel series, the game based on Noble House. Fun game. I love it. Buy, sell stocks. Woo! But so I was talking to my daughter, and I was like, hey, she wants to be a business person anyway. And I was like, well, would you play a game where you ran a business? And she said, yeah. I said, well, talk to your friends. Would they play a game? Yeah. Okay. So I want you to tell me what game you want to play. And over the course of a weekend, a couple of weeks ago, we designed Cookies Cafe, it's a basic commerce game. It's a fetch game, really. Yeah. But, so that doesn't fit over here with Captain Poopy Pants. And it doesn't fit over here with the Aetherborn cycle. But, and so, again, when it comes time for me to either permanently retire or take the long dirt nap, I want this to be a family thing that people can look back and say the Nance family did that. And if ultimately, if I make it a go and neither of them are interested, hey, maybe Wizards of the Coast would be interested. I don't know. But, that's kind of the sky stuff. Yep. But I find that to be very important to me personally, because if not, I'm just Steve, the game designer, that'll never go anywhere and have no real drive or determination to actually get this done, to finish. When I posted what you saw, that was a major achievement for me. And I think that, that third group, those designers, how many of them actually post a 98% complete product? And the answer is not many, right?
Looking at how many incomplete projects are around my table.
You can see the desktop on my laptop right now, But yeah, so that's it's more than a money-making venture. Obvious, it's a piece of my soul. Every time, every word, every little bit, gluing plastic to cardboard so that I can actually play test something. That's a piece of my soul, and it's important to me. And not to dig on Games Workshop, although I do a lot, that's a corporation, and they have shareholders that they need to make happy. Wizards of the Coast, hey, they've got Hasbro has shareholders, and they've got to make them happy. And at some level, it sucks the soul out of stuff.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, man.
Well, that's good. Well, Steve, thanks for taking the time to ramble through both Aether Wings and gaming history and our gaming backgrounds and things. I really appreciate it. If people want to go out and find a copy of Aether Wings Discovery Flight, what's the easiest way for them to track that down?
Gunslinger-studios.com. It's in the downloads page. It'll actually, because I don't want to host anything, it'll take you straight to the itch.io download page.
And we'll put the link in the show notes in the comments here so people can click on it. But that's how I found you. Found you obviously through the Facebook that took me to the itch.io website, then back searched my way to Gunslinger Studios. So I kind of got the circuitous route to get there.
Well, the point is you got there, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, no. Well, thanks for jumping on the show. Thanks for talking about it. I'm excited to actually try it out. The nice thing is, once again, like you said, I have plenty of 60 mil bases around here. I think I have some. I think I have some Titans that I didn't base for Imperialis that I can put on there. So, but yeah, I'll have to get a chance to play through that and let you know how it plays and everything from our perspective. So. Looking forward to it.
All feedback is good feedback, except for this sucks. That's not feedback.
That doesn't help. But thank you. As I told people with Fulcrum Leader, I'm like, I know it's a terrible game. I wrote it. Can we move on? Tell me what's terrible about it. Right? That can be fixed.
Right. I can shave my face. It doesn't change the shape of my face.
Yeah, it doesn't change any of that. Yeah, exactly.
I look forward to hearing your feedback. And I hope that we can get together again soon, because I've got so much more to talk about, man.
Absolutely. Well, as you start rolling things out, we're here to at least specifically for aerial war games. We're happy to talk about anything. We'll talk about tanks, ships, all those other things. But aerial war games is always our niche, and so that's what drugged me into this one when I saw there's another rule set I haven't played yet. I got to go try it.
There's way more planes that are going to hit the sky soon.
Good, excellent. All right. Well, I remind all the listeners out there on our side to please like and subscribe to the podcast, comment, forward it to your buddies. Tell people that, yes, there are people reviewing aerial war games and telling you what's new in the industry. And other than that, as the other Steve, not this Steve, our Steve would say, if you're not flying hard, you're hardly flying. Like the third time I've said this in a row, and it's still a terrible, terrible outro line.
Yeah.
The look on your face is classic. You're like, that's horrible. We've determined, Steve suggested that line to us, and we're going to say it for like 5 episodes until he even admits, okay, it's terrible. But it is his point of pride. He's like, no, it's great, man. It's awesome.